Well, the latest Westpac Melbourne Institute Consumer Sentiment Survey's just been released for the month of July. The headline result shows a small 0.6% rise in sentiment to 93.1. That leaves us still in that cautiously pessimistic range that's persisted for all of 2025. The detail of the survey tells us there's much more to the story though. Our July survey was in the field of the RBA policy decision week, and amongst those surveyed prior to the RBA's surprise announcement that rates would stay on hold, we see a much stronger sentiment read of around 96. If that had stuck, we would have seen sentiment back around the levels that were prevailing just prior to the Liberation Day tariff announcements from the US. Instead, the RBA decision did check that rally. Amongst those surveyed post the decision announcement, the average sentiment read was around 92, and so the average for the month as a whole was a 93. So once again, we've seen a promising start to a survey week undone by events that have occurred mid-week. We saw a similar story back in April with the Liberation Day announcements that gazumped what was a very promising sentiment start to that survey week, leaving sentiment overall soft. And back in November, we saw a similar picture with a more hawkish RBA decision that combined with the surprise US presidential election. The consumer sentiment recovery doesn't seem to be able to win a trick at the moment. When we've seen these promising rallies, they've been undone regularly over the last 6 months, and it reflects this ongoing uncertainty around the wider economic backdrop. When we look at the details though, the check to sentiments rally in July was less pronounced. And I think that goes to the communication that we saw from the RBA following their decision. The fact that it was a split decision, 6-3 in favour of leaving rates on hold, and the messaging from the RBA governor was very clearly this was about a delay, a need to see more information, rather than a change of direction. And so we see from other aspects of the survey responses, consumers have absorbed that message. Around interest rate expectations, they're actually slightly more confident that interest rates will move lower over the next 12 months compared to a month ago. And around their own finances, they are still slightly positive about the next 12-month outlook, which will be partly reflecting that expectation around rates. The wider picture around the consumer sentiment read still points to a lot of uncertainty around the economy. The components tracking expectations for the economy over the next 5 years softened a bit over the month. More broadly, they're sort of in that no man's land. They're around about average long run, but they're not showing a lot of direction. So I think the message around the economy here is that consumers aren't particularly concerned about the economy falling away, but they're not sure which direction it's headed in the next 12 months or even over the medium term. And that uncertainty looks to be weighing a little bit around job loss fears. At the moment, there's not a sharp increase in job loss fears, where unemployment expectations are back around their long run average, but that's consistent with a flat market, again sort of lacking a bit of direction around that. Around the housing related components, not surprisingly, the interest rate decision took a little bit off expectations for prices and saw a dip in assessments of whether now was a good time to buy a dwelling. But in the case of prices, that's coming from a 13-year high last month and didn't really retrace much. And around time to buy a dwelling, that looks to be more of a delayed story. I think that's the wider message here. You know, the responses over the survey week show that decision from the RBA did check what was otherwise going to be quite a solid rise in sentiment, but it looks to be a delayed response rather than the end of interest rate easing, providing support to the consumer more generally. So hopefully when we run our August survey next month, hopefully we do see an RBA rate cut, and that generates a long-awaited next leg to the recovery and consumer sentiment, but we'll need to run the survey again. Thanks.
The content of this recording is informational and of general nature only, and is not intended to constitute a research report or reflect any recommendation or financial advice. It has been prepared without taking into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs, and investment decisions should not be based on it. You should obtain your own independent advice before proceeding with any investment decision. Whilst every effort has been taken to ensure that the contents are correct and any opinions, forecasts, conclusions are reasonably held based on information at the date of recording, Westpac does not make any representation or warranty as to the accuracy or completeness of the statements or information contained in this recording, and any liability therefore is expressly disclaimed to the extent permitted by law. None of the material included in this recording should be copied, published or reproduced in whole or in part without the prior written permission of Westpac.